Hello and welcome to Your United Way, a show that's all about connecting you with your community. I'm Ashley Wright, I'm the host for today's show, and I'm also the Executive Director for the United Way here in Paducah and McCracken County. As many of you may know, the United Way has helped us spearhead a 2-year study on the increase in poverty in Paducah and McCracken County. And we recently published this Impact Poverty Study, which really provides an overview of the recommendations of this committee's 2-year findings. We have asked Glenda Adkisson to be with us today because she has been an important part of the task force. She's also helping to chair one of the sections of this study, which is called the Perceptions section. And if you would like to learn more about this study and read the entire study, you can go to our website, which is unitedwaypaducah.org. Glenda, thank you so much for being here with us today and for serving on the committee over the last 2 years. It has been a long journey to get to the point where we actually have something published and ready for the community to look at. But why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Well, certainly. I am Glenda Adkisson. I actually teach by occupation. I teach and do consulting for business continuity planning, but have been involved with organizations helping people that do have needs for a number of years, and have served on the Impact Poverty Task Force and am now a certified trainer for Bridges Out of Poverty, which we'll be talking about some today.
Well, how did you initially get involved in the task force?
Well, for a number of years, as you know, I served as Executive Director of the American Red Cross, and prior to moving to Paducah, I served as a school nurse for many years. In both capacities, I saw firsthand how poverty impacts a child's learning process and their school experience. It impacts the likelihood of experiencing a disaster event, and it certainly impacts the recovery from any life-changing event, and that may be something like a fire, but it may also be a divorce. Mm-hmm. It may be a death in the family. But if someone is currently living in poverty, that recovery process takes much longer and is much more difficult.
I don't think people realize that. You know, they don't think about how a divorce or something like that unfortunately is so common can actually send so many people from middle class to poverty. Exactly.
And often, a year or 2 years later, and I certainly saw this at Red Cross, someone who has experienced an event, if they're just trying to make it every week, and they experience an event that throws them off track, it may be years before they get back to any type of normal, for them, lifestyle.
Well, the Impact Poverty Task Force divided the strategies that we have to reduce poverty into 6 different areas. And you really jumped on the bandwagon when it came to the Perceptions group. And in the Perceptions group, we have really looked at a particular training called the Bridges Out of Poverty training. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what Bridges Out of Poverty is?
Yes, immediately when I heard about the Impact Poverty Initiative, of course I was very interested. But it was when I heard the concepts in Bridges Out of Poverty that I was compelled to get more directly involved. And the reason was because the Impact Poverty, the Bridges Out of Poverty concepts was really something that described and it was an approach to addressing poverty in a way that I had not previously seen in any of the other programs that I've worked with in the past. It was very different. And so not long after coming on and joining the Impact Poverty Task Force, I attended a very intensive 1-week training where I became a Bridges Out of Poverty trainer so that I could work with the group in that way. The Perceptions Committee or Perceptions area, of course, is to really help people understand what this Impact Poverty Initiative is about and to share with them the Bridges Out of Poverty training.
And I've heard you say this before, and I've been through the training, and so I can kind of attest to this, that Bridges Out of Poverty isn't a isn't a program. It's not a new program that we initiate in the community. It's really a set of concepts about how we work with people in poverty and how we help move them to the middle class, and kind of recognizing our own prejudices and our own issues as we deal with people who perhaps are different than us. Am I along the right track?
You are. This set of concepts and ideas really can be incorporated into everything we do. That may be how we work with our employees, our clients. It may be a church and their ministry. But the basis for this approach is understanding, and that is what really spoke to me, was by understanding the lens, if you will, with which poverty, middle class, and wealth view their own world, and recognizing that people that are in poverty are very capable problem solvers, and they are able, given the right resources, they are able to take some steps. It was a very different approach. I've never seen an approach that was more focused on understanding. And what sometimes we forget is, consciously or unconsciously, if we see something that we do not understand, often we have a tendency to judge, and we don't think that's true. I can tell you personally, I have felt very compelled to help people that are in need. Saw it in the school system. I've seen it through Red Cross. I've seen it in other periods in my life, and I did feel like I was very compassionate. What this program helped me to realize was that often I would sometimes be a little frustrated if I didn't see what I thought was motivation on someone's part. Yeah. Motivation to get a job, motivation to get an education. And what the Bridges concepts helped me to understand was why sometimes that is the case. It doesn't condemn or condone anything. It just is all about understanding. And I found that very different.
Well, and I think, when we started out as a task force, when we began the study in 2010, we as a task force went through this training. And for me, it was such an aha moment, because it did just that. It allowed, I think, everybody in that group, whether they were in poverty, in middle class, or in wealth, to kind of have a basis of understanding. And so it was so powerful for me. But I think for someone sitting out there who, maybe is a manager of a plant in the community, or who is a school teacher, or works in one of the hospitals, why would this be beneficial to them?
Well, let me first tell you about the aha moment that I had. When I was going through the training, we actually made these mental models, drew them out, and it was a picture or a drawing that kind of conveys a lot of information. And what we did is we mentally walked through a day in the life of someone currently living in poverty and in the life of someone currently living in middle class. And then we compared the two. And it became very clear, these vague concepts that I may have known but just hadn't really thought about as clearly. It then became very clear that if I do not have dependable transportation, I don't have the resources to provide food and shelter for my family, then all I focus on is getting through that day. I really have no future story. I don't have the capability to make future plans and goal-oriented plans for the future, because I'm just struggling to get through the day. We have something called the tyranny of the moment. Anytime, and that can be anyone who's in a crisis situation, if we are stuck in the tyranny of the moment, it's very difficult to strategize about the future.
Yeah. Well, we're wrapping up this segment shortly, so let me touch on a few things that I want you to speak on. One, what does this training look like if somebody's sitting out there and saying, I want to bring this to my church, to my workplace, to my civic group? What can they do to get this kind of training?
They can contact United Way, and I'm so happy that you all will be coordinating this. We recommend that you have at least 10 to 12 people, because we do break down in discussion groups, and for a minimum fee of $10 per person, that will cover the expense of the training. Certainly we want everyone trained, so if someone cannot afford the $10, we will work with them to make sure they can get the training. But we go through mental models of poverty, we go through hidden rules of economic class, we will go through resources. What resources, because it's not all about financial, are needed, and then how as a community we can come together to provide resources for those that need additional resources to move from poverty to middle class. So they can contact United Way via email or calling and set that up.
And it is typically how long?
It is going to be initially a 4-hour session. Now, if you covered all the material, it could be 2 to 3 days. If someone wants to go more in depth, then we can set up additional sessions. But the introduction and the overview of these concepts is a 4-hour block of time.
Now, once somebody has done that, I know for us, when the task force, again, I keep going back to that, but one of the things that we were so excited about was something called Getting Ahead in a Getting By World, and that is really a program that's kind of a branch off of the Bridges Out of Poverty training. And so just briefly, can you talk about that, what I consider to be almost the next step in some cases of the Bridges training?
You know, you're right, and the exact title is Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World. It is actually a 15-week program that is designed for participants, we call investigators, to look at how poverty impacts an individual, how it impacts a community, what resources are needed to get people to be able to move from poverty to middle class, and helps them investigate the world through the lens of different economic classes and identify resources that they might need in order to kind of change their situation. I'll tell you, I went through that program whenever I was in the training, and I learned a lot about myself, and I think anyone can benefit from the Getting Ahead program.
And it's trained facilitators, correct? They're helping to lead these groups.
Yes, it is. They are facilitators. They are not instructors, but they do facilitate groups that come together. And if, say, a church or an employer would like, or a school, would like to have a Getting Ahead group in their organization, they can contact United Way as well, and we can train facilitators and help them through that process of getting a Getting Ahead group started.
Well, I know that both the Bridges training and the Getting Ahead program have been so powerful for those of us that have gone through them, and it's really our hope with this perceptions part of the Impact Poverty Study that we really help get this message out to the community. And so we're so grateful for the leadership that you've taken, Glenda. You've really got a passion for this and have really helped us push this out into the community. And I hope those of you who are listening today, if you're interested in getting this training, again, in your workplace, in your church, in your civic group, in your school, that you will contact the United Way office. Again, our number is 442-1691, and we will be happy to help get you connected with Glenda and help get this training into your workplace or your group. We thank you again, Glenda, for being here, and we will be back with our next segment in just a moment. Hello and welcome back to Your United Way. In our previous segment, we spoke about the Getting Ahead groups, and we have two wonderful ladies here with us today to talk a little bit more in depth about those groups, Ann Ponder-Simpson and Tiffany Gartley. Ann, why don't you introduce yourself?
As you had said, my name is Ann Ponder-Simpson. I'm currently the Director of Resident Services for the Housing Authority of Paducah. And I just absolutely, it was such a privilege and an exciting experience to be part of the Getting Ahead and Just Getting By World experience as a facilitator.
So you went through the facilitation process that Glenda had spoken about, and Tiffany, you were an investigator, as we call it.
That is correct. I was an investigator.
Will you talk a little bit about, well, introduce yourself first, Tiffany.
Okay,
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Tiffany Gartley. I also work with Ann at the Housing Authority of Paducah. I'm the Youth and Family Services Coordinator.
Okay, and so how did you all get involved in the Getting Ahead groups? And you want to talk a little bit about that experience for you?
Certainly. It was by the recommendation and support and encouragement of Cal Ross, our executive director, who is serving as part of the Poverty Task Force.
Yes.
And when I believe discussions came up about the Getting Ahead groups getting started, he had suggested that I be considered. And the Housing Authority and Cal have been very supportive, and I've been very appreciative of being able to participate.
And so, Tiffany, you know, everybody, with the first groups that we had, just for a little background for our viewers, we had 2 groups that started out, and you participated in one of those 2 groups that initially were kind of our guinea pigs, I guess, for the Getting Ahead groups. And tell me a little bit about that experience for you as an investigator and what that was like coming into that group.
It was very interesting, Ashley. I say that because it allowed me to look inside of myself and understand my poverty, why I was in poverty, and what I can do to get myself out of poverty. What I was already doing that was good, and what I can do that was better, things that I hadn't even thought about. So I really like that part, is the selfish part of me, and I also like the fact that I saw other people's story and how their life was going and how it wasn't quite like mine, but we had so many things in common. A lot of us were able to bond and help each other out. We were shoulders to cry on. We shared information with each other. So it was a lot to deal with, and you learned a whole lot.
Well, it's a 15-week course, so we're not talking about just once or twice that you're getting together. I mean, it's a pretty intense commitment.
Yeah.
At what point during this 15 weeks did a light bulb come on for you? I mean, was there kind of an aha moment for you in this process?
It was my goal setting.
Tell me a little bit about that.
And I realized that they needed to be SMART, and that was specific, measurable, attainable, S-M-A-R, what's the R? Realistic, and time measurable.
Okay.
And a lot of times when you set goals, you don't have a specific plan to get all the way through that goal. So when you make them SMART, it makes them more attainable, and that was like, ah. So that was my aha moment, realizing that how it's so easy to get set off track, and if you have a goal and you make it SMART, it's more attainable. So that was really good for me. That was my aha moment.
When, you know, we've talked a little bit about this, about how for so many people in the community, particularly people who have perhaps never been in poverty, there's this mentality of, why don't people in poverty just get a job? If they don't get a job, we wouldn't have to have all these social benefits. We wouldn't have to have all of these drains on our resources. You know, how do you combat that? Because let's just be honest, there are lazy people in poverty, there's lazy people in the middle class, there are lazy wealthy people. But so we know that there are some people that aren't interested in getting a job, but for those people that make those kind of comments, how do you respond to that through this Getting Ahead process that you've been engaged in?
It helps you understand that people are human. Everybody likes pleasure, everybody likes to have fun, everybody wants to live life. And if you're poor and you watch your parents work 2 jobs and you still can't have any fun, you still can't do anything, you're barely making it, what's really the point of working, Ashley? Mm-hmm. It's no point, because you're gonna always have nothing, and then you'll watch the rich people driving their nice fancy cars and looking down at you pointing like, why don't you get a job? Well, McDonald's isn't gonna cut it. Neither is McDonald's and Burger King. So it's kind of pointless for some people, I can't say for everyone, to get a job when it's just as bad when you could just have everything and not have a job.
Yeah, I mean there seems to be some real, so many people in poverty are working. Mm-hmm. You know, they're working, as you said, 1 or 2 minimum wage jobs, and yet they still find themselves in poverty. So for so many, it's not about a work ethic or a lack of a work ethic. It's
the jobs that are available to them. And a lot of times you have to have an education to get a job that's going to be worthwhile. And maybe getting an education isn't something that you are really interested in or you know about, or maybe not, you may not even think about getting an education because you have other priorities. So if you're focused on making sure that you can pay your bills, or you have a sick parent that you have to pay for, or maybe you have siblings that you have to care for, you're not really concerned about pursuing higher education that could make you better off in the future. You're trying to get by today. So
just the moment,
that
from moment to moment. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Ann, go ahead.
Well, if I may respond also, the the whole idea of we'll just get a job. When you're looking at, and of course the task force identified this, and many of that, a lot of that information is in the publication you've mentioned, and it's available online. There are a lot of disincentives. And I think that's one of the things that it was so critical to the investigators helping the poverty task force understand the disincentives to taking a 10-cent an hour raise, then all of a sudden losing certain benefits or being put into a different tax bracket, that then they're experiencing actually a net loss.
Right.
And that being something very difficult to work through. So having to be very financially savvy with very little is I think a strength of many of the investigators that were in part of the group that I had the privilege to work with.
You know, Glenda Adkisson, who was on here earlier, one of the things she said, which I think is so true, has been my experience, that people in poverty are great problem solvers. Great
Yes.
problem solvers.
Yes.
Because you're dealing with problems every single day when you're in poverty. And so I thought as a task force member that when we actually brought in the Getting Ahead investigators like you, Tiffany, and the other individuals that participated, just the wealth of knowledge that you all brought to this study was so important, so valuable to how we create programs. So many programs that we create, even in our own community, actually are not helpful to people in poverty. And I just found that fascinating. I mean, I don't know what your experience has been with that, but it's interesting to see how we create these programs without really looking at how they're going to impact the people we intend to serve.
Piggybacking off of Ann, it's true. Well, if you get a job, say you get 2 jobs because you don't want to live extra poor, you may lose your daycare benefits, or you may go from free daycare to having to pay daycare, and all the money you're making from your second job, you have to pay daycare now. So,
And you're away from your child more now.
you're away from your child more. Now you have to pay more daycare, and you may lose more food stamps. You're not going to get your cash benefits. You may lose your transportation benefits. It's a lot of benefits that the system will give you that you'll qualify when you have absolutely no income. So when you begin to raise your income to get yourself on a better level, you begin to lose those benefits, and it just gets harder and harder and harder. And some people, it's easy to break down.
Yeah.
It really is. So you have to have motivation, strength, and maybe a support system. That's why I really liked the program, because it gave us a support system amongst ourselves. It helped us to learn that we need to get more involved in the community, join different civic groups. So it was really eye-opening.
Do you think, you said that you are now one of the first people in your family to have graduated from college,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That's a huge feat, no matter if you're the first or the 100th person in your family. That's an accomplishment. Do you feel like being part of this task force has helped you with those kind of goals moving forward?
Absolutely. I really do, because it's positive all the way around. You can only go up. So it gives you more information. I did more self-actualization, so it just helped me see where I was falling short to how I can continue to better myself. So it was the different community programs that are available to me with my income bracket, and how I can just get better. Even with a college degree, you can have a college degree and still need assistance depending on your level, because poverty is different for each individual. So I think it's beneficial.
Well, there are probably people sitting out there who are listening to this and wondering, how can I bring this kind of a program to my workplace or to my school, to my church? They need to have trained facilitators, correct?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that's an important part of this. But why do you think this kind of program is beneficial to just about any group in this community?
Awareness. Not only is it a forum for investigators to learn and to have those aha moments, it is also for the facilitators and for the groups sponsoring to have those aha moments, for the better understanding, for the broadening their understanding of various cultures. And I mean that in the sense of socioeconomic culture, social culture, educational culture. You know, the gamut that is actually involved in evaluating poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the awareness, the sensitivity that can come from that, then of course the passion it sparks for them to be involved and be supportive of the comprehensive approach that United Way is taking to this for our community as a whole.
Well, we're really excited because there are already church groups and some other individuals that we've been talking about who are going to get these getting ahead groups in their like I said, in their Sunday school classes and in the areas that they're working with people who are in poverty. I want to encourage those of you who are listening, though, that really doing that Bridges Out of Poverty training first, I think, is important, because it kind of sets that groundwork for how you really develop these getting ahead groups and begin to really impact the lives of people in your community. And so, I'm excited to see what is going to happen. I know I've stayed in communication with several of the getting ahead. It happened to be all women in these first two groups that we did, but many of them have either gone on to finish their degree, have started school. Several of them, I think 4, have now gotten new jobs. So I think that we're beginning to see the kind of the fruits of those first groups.
It's empowering.
But it's not been fast, though, you know, and I think that's the thing, that this is not something that's going to happen overnight in our community, that it does take time, and it takes those kind of relationships that you were talking about, how, you know, building that kind of social capital in the community, so that when you get ready to look for a job, you know who to call, you know who to talk to when you're trying to figure out what area of town you want to move to, or those kind of things. So, you know, I'm just so impressed by what you're doing, Tiffany, and the kind of changes that you're making in your life. And as we've talked, you know, so your kids are going to see a different life.
Yeah.
And that's what we want, is for that next generation. And so thank you so much. And thank you, Anne, for being involved, for your leadership, and for facilitating these groups. I know that it's been something that you've been very passionate about. So thank you so much for participating. And if you are interested in having a Getting Ahead group, or if you're interested in going through the Bridges Out of Poverty training, I want to encourage you to contact our office. Again, that's 442-1691, or visit our website for our contact information. That's unitedwaypaducah.org. You can also, as I mentioned, download this booklet, which gives you an overview of the 2-year study that the United Way helps spearhead. And we look forward to the community getting involved as we help reduce poverty in Paducah and in McCracken County. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Your United Way. Look forward to seeing you back at our next one.